Hi everyone, this is Volker. I'm the game developer behind Kohlrabi Starship, and recently I went to Gamescom and showed my game to the world. And I got a lot of feedback. So, did people have fun playing my game? Continue watching to find out. I'm going to talk about all the fun stuff that happened at Gamescom. This video is sponsored by Brilliant, more on them later. So, first of all, what is Gamescom? It's a giant event in Germany to showcase new and upcoming games, and this year there were 400,000 visitors. It's both for the public, but there's also a business area where you can connect with publishers, people from marketing, influencers and so on. But that's not even it. Gamescom happens during just 5 days, but there's so many other events happening around that time. I completely underestimated again how intense this is going to get, physically and emotionally. For example, before Gamescom there's Devcom, which is an event mostly for game developers, and there are many really cool talks about game development. And then there are some side events like Courage, a party in a club where people play a game to get a free drink. And there's also pitching events happening as well, like the European Game Showcase, where you go on a stage for 3 minutes to pitch your game. Unfortunately, I didn't take too many videos this time because I was just overwhelmed by everything going on. Going to Gamescom is quite expensive. There are expensive tickets for the booth, for all the side events, for the hotel and for the traveling costs. So if you want to go as a developer by yourself, you really need to calculate if it's worth it for your studio. But fortunately, I was supported by Swiss Games, which is a public funding organization for Swiss game developers. Every year they select studios to send to Gamescom, which is super amazing. Many countries actually have a similar system, and therefore you can see a lot of country booths represented in the business area. And since Gamescom has both a business area but also a public-facing area, I ended up having 2 booths. The second one in the so-called indie area, with lots of other amazing indie developers. But as a solo developer, it's obviously impossible to be in 2 places at once, even though I would love to have that superpower. So I hired a friend to help me out. Preparing for Gamescom was a bit easier this year. I could reuse a lot of the stuff I did for GDC. I just went and printed some new flyers and business cards, and I also teamed up with 10 really cool cozy game studios to prepare a sticker rally. So gamers could win a free sticker sheet if they played some of our demos. It's a fantastic idea to promote each other's games. I then booked my hotel, packed up my monitor and my old trusty laptop that I really hoped would make it through this adventure, and off I went. And with that, the insanity began. There's just so much stuff happening at the same time, and we were basically standing the whole day at the booth, talking non-stop for 12 hours. There's not really any breaks we could take, cause there was no one to take over, but it's also really fun. I can't even talk about everything that happened, it would make this video so unreasonably long, so let me just talk about the highlights. I already mentioned the European Game Night. It's an event hosted by the German Pitching Clinic. They offer pitching training beforehand, and a few studios were selected to pitch their games in front of the crowd. You can watch my last video all about how to pitch your game. I had polished my pitch even further since then, and it was absolutely nerve-wracking to wait until it was my turn on the stage in front of all these people. But it was really fun. They announced us like wrestlers, basically.
Next up, from Switzerland, Whimsical Wolf Games.
I was really happy with how it turned out, even though there was no win for Kohlrabi Starship this time. But that's okay. And then visiting Devcom was super inspiring too. I went to hear all the talks on writing because I feel writing is the area where I still need to learn and improve the most. Well, or at least where I feel the least confident in my own abilities. The absolute highlight was a panel about how to write complex romances with a writer from Baldur's Gate 3, another one from Disco Elysium, and a writer who worked on Horizon Zero Dawn and Boyfriend Dungeon. I'm such a fan of well-written games, so it was a bit of a dream to hear these heroes of the game industry talk about their work. I of course, also had set up quite a few meetings with publishers in advance in the business area. And some publishers I had already met at GDC, and meeting again was really amazing. Because to me it meant there was continued interest in Kohlrabi Starship and how it's coming along. But for most publishers it still seems a bit too early in the development process to sign a deal. This time I also had a few meetings with larger publishers that are quite well known. I was super excited about meeting them, and instead of them coming to the Swiss booth, I was invited to their booth. So I followed the online map, you know, because Gamescom is freaking huge, and I arrived at this giant booth surrounded by giant walls. You know, most of the booths at Gamescom are open and you can just walk in and talk to people, but not here. I then found a reception in one corner and introduced myself and was sent in and asked to wait at their bar. They had a whole bar inside their booth with free drinks and fancy donuts, and there I stood intimidated and ordering a still water and awkwardly hanging out until my meeting would start. And if you're a developer yourself and wondering what do you even talk about in these publisher meetings, I have to say that it's very, very different from publisher to publisher. Some just asked me to do the pitch, so I showed them my pitch deck and I did my practice pitch talk. I also had a publisher who was like, oh, I really like your game and I already forwarded everything to the team, so let's just talk about anything else that's not business. And we basically just talked about games and connected, which was really, really nice. And then there are publishers who ask you a lot of questions, like in an interview. Basic questions like, what's your timeline? How much money will this cost? What are you looking for in terms of marketing? What's your team, and do you want to bring more people onto the team? What's your inspiration? What's your background? And then more difficult questions like, which game inspired your art? What's the estimated word count of the game? And all this kind of stuff. I think it's important not to stress yourself out too much beforehand and to just answer honestly, even if sometimes you don't know the answer on the spot. And if there's interest in your game, you can always answer in more detail in a follow-up email. If you feel like you have a good connection to a person, you can also ask for feedback, which is quite valuable. I had one meeting with a publisher who didn't yet want to move forward with the game, and then we just had a long conversation about the reasons and what areas of the game could be improved. It was almost like a brainstorming session, and even though it can be tough to hear that your game needs improvement, it is also the most valuable feedback. And this leads to something I never really thought about before I started making a game. I assumed if you put together all the right ingredients, like a really solid programming, beautiful art, great music, then you make a great game automatically, right? But of course, if you studied game design, for example, unlike me, you know obviously there's more to it. Game design, game mechanics, and teaching the player how to play without being too annoying or tedious are really, really big components and need a lot of thought and testing and time. So, let me give you an example. In the current demo of Kohlrabi Starship, you can interact with a lot of things on the grid. I'm very close to finishing the vertical slide, which means I have almost all the systems in the game, but it's still lacking content, of course, and it's also still lacking balance. And so, when you as a player start playing, you quickly realize, oh, I can interact with any square on the map. And then the first thing you encounter, once you can walk around, is a rock. So as a player, you conclude, well, there must be something I can do with this rock. And I just put the rock there because I thought it would look nice as decoration and didn't give it a second thought. But then in playtesting, I did realize that everyone wanted to interact with the rock, and it was really frustrating for the players when they couldn't. Or it was simply confusing. And this is the part that's the game design, where it's really all about being clear to the player what they can do and how they can interact with the world without needing a text disclaimer everywhere. How will I solve the rock? I can either remove it or just let the player be able to pick it up and put it down again. When teaching a player how to play, there are two extremes. One is to display tons of tutorials with text in the beginning, and only by playing through this very long tutorial will you unlock all your abilities before the game really begins. And this is usually not so cool, because you don't want to read all of that text. you don't want to wait until you can finally play. And it's just annoying, and a lot of people will probably just skip this. On the other hand, you can just let the player do everything right from the beginning, like in Minecraft, for example. But it can be very overwhelming and unclear what the goal of the game is and what a player should do. And so you need to find a right balance. What I learned at Gamescom from all the feedback that I got is that there's still a lot I need to do for balancing. Apart from the feedback, of course, as always, if you show something to people, there were suddenly bugs that you've never seen before, that I've never seen before. So I suddenly saw myself faced with the game freezing at very inconvenient times, which I was very sorry about. But what can you do? If there's only 6 hours of sleep during that week, there's not enough time to go to your hotel and fix the bug, so I just had to go with it. If you have dreamt about making your own game, but don't feel confident in your coding skills, and you want to avoid all the nasty bugs, then let me introduce you to the sponsor of this video, Brilliant. Brilliant is where you learn by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in math, data analysis, programming, and AI. I believe the most important part when learning to code is not just memorizing a programming language, but actually learning how to problem solve and think better, and Brilliant is really good at teaching you that. And it's easy to get into too. If you replace some minutes of scrolling on your phone by learning with Brilliant, imagine how fast that adds up to building real knowledge. Learning a little every day is the most important thing you can do to get closer to your goal of coding your own game one day. They have a lot of courses, and it's growing every day. They also teach you foundations of math and data science, but most importantly for you, they have great courses to develop your mind to think like a programmer and begin writing complex programs to build games. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, you can visit brilliant.org/volcadev or scan the QR code on screen. Or you can click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. And now back to Gamescom. It was really cool to learn so much from the feedback I got. But at the same time, it was super motivating to see people who are not game developers play the game for the first time. I was really nervous in the beginning because I thought those people would be very harsh and might just say, "Oh, well, this is boring. Let's just move on to the next game." But in reality, it turned out that was not the case at all. The gamers that were not game developers themselves were so much more able to just enjoy the game instead of looking at everything that still needed to be done, which was immensely motivating for me. To be honest, before Gamescom, I was a little bit struggling with motivation. Not that I wanted to stop working on the game, not at all. But it was not coming as effortlessly to me as it did in the beginning, because I was very aware of all the things that still needed improvement. I had basically this giant to-do list, which, when you are looking at it in a more negative way, could be seen as a giant fault list. I knew that publishers I'm going to talk to would see all of these faults as well. And I know I can fix all of these things, but not before Gamescom, since I needed more time. But the gamers didn't see this list and didn't notice the faults and to-dos. Instead, there were so many people who just enjoyed petting the cats and planting some things that it really brought back the spark that I had when I started working on the game. I can't wait to continue working on it and putting all the ideas into the game that I still have. Of course, the gamers also had a lot of feedback, and one of them was even so kind to write me this super cute bug report. And I think in the end that was the most valuable part for me in participating in Gamescom, to get this huge boost from people playing the game. It was also interesting to see how different the people were who were interested in the game. It was not just one demographic of people, which made me really happy. I even met with some of the followers of my Discord. If you haven't joined the Discord, you should. It's really fun to hang out. There's a lot of cool people discussing game development, but also other stuff like sharing cat pictures and plant pictures. Yeah, and then at some point I sneaked away from the booth for some minutes to get this super cute shark and these cat socks because my shoes were wet from a crazy rainstorm. And lastly, another interesting or useful part of going to a convention is that Often they also have online events on Steam, which means a lot more people see the Steam page and wishlist the game. And in the future, I will definitely make another video where I will break down how I got the first few thousands of wishlists and about marketing. If you're interested, then let me know in the comments below or subscribe to be notified once the video comes out. So now you know how Gamescom went for me, and now that this huge event is behind me, I can go back into the core development of the game and really focus on creating a really nice, polished demo that I hope you will all like. Thank you for watching. Bye!